from the autobiographical point of view, I learned French before I learned Russian, at the instance of my parents, who thought that that was the elegant thing to do, was to speak French. And while I am a great Francophile, I wanted at the same time to know how the other half lived. And so I started studying Russian in college. So for me, these were a thesis, elegance versus antithesis, the meaning of life. Then, when I came to Wesleyan, I co-taught with my dear colleague Michael Danahy a course on the French and Russian novel. He was in the Romance Languages department, so he was the expert on the French, and I was on the Russian. And this developed into initially some work on Madame Bovary and Anna Karenina, and that in turn developed further into some work on Crime and Punishment, and finally on A Hero of Our Time. And it's taken me quite some time to write, because I did it in increments over sabbaticals over a period of over 10 years. And now there it all is in one place. I do the French sources for 3 major novels of the 19th century. The first is A Hero of Our Time by Lermontov, which is the first Russian novel. And he is very deliberately drawing on a bunch of French stories that had appeared in the press, in a journal that was published in French in Petersburg very recently. And so it's as if he's saying, look, see, we can make a novel out of this stuff. And we're going to redo it in a certain way. And then Dostoevsky does that with about a dozen different French novels by a number of people, some of them you've heard of and some not. Balzac, for example, The Wild Ass's Skin. If you think about it, you know, it's very much like the beginning of Crime and Punishment. The young man in depths of despair and hideous poverty, and what's he going to do with himself, and does something desperate. Because he's on the verge of suicide. So it's the same in both those novels, but Dostoevsky's rewriting it a certain way. Same thing with Balzac's Père Goriot, and a bunch of other texts, some of them by writers perhaps you've never heard of. Jules Janin, have you ever heard of this man? The French ignored this excellent writer until his centenary in 1970. And he writes something called La Confezione, and then it's all about how he commits a murder and he's feeling very guilty about it, and this is very much what Crime and Punishment is about. So that's chapter 3, and chapter 4 is about Anna Karenina, and Madame Bovary is the most important text that Tolstoy rewrites, but there are many others too. Zola recently was produced, was it Thérèse Raquin was produced on Broadway, I think, within the last 5 years or so, anyway. Be that as it may, he takes little elements from the Zola, which Tolstoy detested as naturalistic and disgusting and vile, which it is, I mean, deliberately by Zola, and then he shows what one might do with this approach to adultery in a more, this is a hard word to use, ideal form. That is, turning it into a quest for the meaning of existence rather than a sort of naturalistic tale of salacious interest for the reader.